Future. It takes pure human grit and creativity to create the possible future. I am very, very, very happy today, and it's a real privilege to spend some time having a conversation with Gene Dolgoff. Gene is one of those people that has really had a serious number of breakthroughs in his life. He's been a leader in the field of imaging and in holography. He was the inventor of the LCD projector, HD TV, and most importantly his work in holography. And also I understand he's doing some really leading edge work in cancer research right now. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think he's most known, however, as the creator or the inspiration behind Star Trek's holodeck. And so, Gene, I guess I should begin by saying something like, beam me up. So how are you today?
I'm great. It's such a pleasure to be with you and meet with you. I've heard a lot about you, and this is just a great treat for me.
Well, I'm happy to have the conversation as well, and I'd in particular like to begin with maybe some work on the subject of how holography and human beings might connect. I know it's a really interesting science, but I'm less interested in the science of holography than how human beings can interact with holography, how holography can affect our world, or maybe already is affecting our world, and kind of what the future might look like from your point of view.
Well, holography really is based on some very basic principles that really are understandable in physics, which have to do with the way energy interacts with energy. And really everything in our perceivable universe is a perception of the interaction of energy. And all a hologram is just a recording of that interaction of energy in some location at some time. But the principles behind it are very, very basic principles, and everything, since everything is made of that, everything follows those same principles down to the lowest level. So that means that in human beings, the way we interact, the way we perceive, the way things happen in our lives and in our experience of our lives all follow the rules of holography, which is amazing.
So would you say that things like, I don't know, paradigms, worldviews, mindsets are constructed with energy?
Yes, I would say that, and I would say that they follow the same rules as the basic rules of how energy interacts with energy.
So when people experience, say, a transformation or a eureka experience, is that somehow an interaction of different energies, or?
Yes, it is. Just the same way as a thought is an interaction of energies. A realization is an interaction of energies, and they follow the same rules.
That's pretty interesting. I like metaphors a lot, so I'm kind of curious about this. There's a lot of strange things going on in the world right now. And we're seeing a lot of shifting, like a pendulum swing almost, from a progressive world to a perhaps more conservative one. And I'm not making a comment about particular ideology here, but in terms of the phenomenon of change that's occurring in the world, do you think that's related to somehow different energies canceling each other out or disrupting?
Absolutely everything follows the same rules. Everything. So certainly the swings that you see in ideologies or in literal occurrences, they will all follow that. And you have no sense of choice if you look at it on that level. But in fact, our experience of choice is part of the illusion of what we perceive in our universe.
You know, that's kind of consistent with my thinking, which is I've often said that we're used by our worldview, or we're used by the paradigm, and the only choice we really have is what's going to use us. I wonder how that resonates with your thinking.
You know, there's an interesting movie, Men in Black, where they had this guy who was an older looking guy with a beard, and he was a professor kind of looking guy. And at some point they killed him, and then they opened him up, and really there was a little guy in there who was the driver of the body, you know, and he was really the being inside of that being. So life is like that. I look at life like I'm on a ride, and I'm the observer, because the appearance of my ability to control things and interact with things based on my volition, I realize is an illusion. And really I see that it's all an observational experience, a ride. And so when things don't go the way I want it to go, or the way I think I want it to go, it doesn't bother me, because I know that I have no control anyway.
That's you and I are on the same page in that regard. You know, I think we were talking earlier about my use of the term real-time world. If I think about what's occurring, I've distinguished that it's characterized by at least four things. One is accelerating change. Two, and everything's looking like a hockey stick. Two, a complexity. Three, a loss of control, if we ever had any. And four is the unpredictability. And what this translates into, if I think about it in terms of my original work in computer programming, is as computers got faster and faster, the gap between inputs and outputs got smaller and smaller. And at some point, for all practical purposes, machines transformed from information processors to performing processors. And we're doing process control and things like that. So now I'm postulating that the gap between the past and the future is getting smaller and smaller, and that we are really right in the middle of a kind of existential crisis where we can't rely on history to tell us what to do in the future. And so for the first time, we're having to kind of invent life on a day-to-day basis, and it's disrupting a lot of, it's not just disruptive technology, it's disrupting who we are as human beings. And so I'm interested in how holography might be a metaphor, at least, or maybe people are a metaphor for holography, I'm not sure which. But how do you see human beings and holography connected, or how do you see what's going on in the world from the point of view of holography?
Well, of course, it's a multi-level question and a multi-level answer. Holography, again, gives the principles behind the construction or reconstruction of everything. So that includes the physical stuff, it includes the perceptions, it includes the interactions and the perceptions of all of those. One of the aspects of holography is that each point contains everything. So from one point you can have all the data of the whole universe, and from another point you likewise can have all the data of the whole universe. So what you see in one aspect of a person, you will see in all other aspects of the person, just the same way.
So let me probe this a little bit. This is pretty exciting, because if I think about a lot of the kind of social things, from Black Lives Matter to the social harassment stuff we've been seeing the last few weeks, to some of the assumptions that are being challenged about politics and civil discourse, and just a whole lot of things seem to be simultaneously breaking down. And at the same time, a lot of things that we assumed in the past, or took for granted in the past, or tolerated in the past, are now becoming intolerable and are no longer taken for granted. So I'm wondering if you're saying that the holographic nature of the brain and the holographic nature of our reality would say that if we start to have a breakthrough, say in the, the Me Too movement, to create awareness of this problem in the world, is going on over here, that there are correlates going on elsewhere on the planet. So whether it's politics or social behavior or I suppose anything, it's basically all connected. Everything's connected to everything else.
Sort of like the collective unconscious that used to be in the vernacular decades ago. It's all a single interference pattern. The universe and everything in it and all of the contents are part of that. I mean, to talk about physics for a moment, the idea of a holographic universe is that there is a flat hologram outside the universe that contains the information of the entire volume of the universe. And it's a very strange kind of thing to think about, that everything within the volume of the universe is actually contained on the surface. And you might think that doesn't make any sense. How can you cram that much information, the volumetric information, onto just the surface? But in fact, you can. And the Nobel Prize was given for the realization of that, by the way.
Are you suggesting, or what do you think about the proposition I've read before, which is that we as human beings are holograms?
Well, exactly. Everything is a hologram. The hologram is a recording, or it's a structure. It doesn't have to be called a recording. It's a structure from which energy interacts and changes its patterns, creating all these illusions of structure and matter and perception and ideas, and everything that's in the universe is all created out of that. And it's all coming from an isolated location.
So you're not just saying everything's connected to everything else, you're saying everything is everything else.
Exactly right. That's right.
So Gene, just to continue this conversation, can you elaborate on how you have made this human being and holographic connection, and how it manifests, or how it's taking form in your particular work and your interests?
There are many aspects that of reality that I've interacted with, that I've benefited from my understanding of holography to be able to work with these things. So for instance, since everything interacts by energy interference, that's the nature of the universe that I learned by learning the rules of holography. It allowed me to understand how the brain works. I mean, the brain is considered to be the most complex system in the universe, and one which nobody really understands. But it's just like the magic trick you see in a show where they saw the girl in half, and you can't imagine how that could be done, and it's really magical. However, when you find out how it's done, then it's not so magical anymore. It's kind of boring and it's very simple. Well, it's sort of like that. For instance, when I studied the brain, I've been writing this book on the brain and how it works, and to me it was also a mystery and unknowable and complex. But once I understood the principles behind holography and how energy interacts with energy, all of a sudden the brain became very simple and very easy to understand how it does what it does. And most importantly, it's true that today we can mimic a lot of what the brain does with computers and software, but how could all of that be done with no one to write the software? How did the brain write itself? How can that be? But if you understand the principles of holography, it becomes very obvious how it all automatically happens simply because of the way waves interact with waves, and that it's just a natural outcome of that interaction. So it just is mind-blowing to understand that all of this is simply a consequence of the basic principles of what happens when waves interact with each other.
Interesting. You know, one of the words that I use a lot is the word possibility, and trying to illuminate the notion that a possibility is not real. It's a possibility. If it was real, it would be an example. So my question is the word possibility fit into your holographic worldview?
Well, think about that. Possibility is something that exists in your mind. Your mind can conceive of a possibility. Your mind can believe in a possibility.
But would you agree that conceiving a possibility is not the same as the possibility itself?
Absolutely right. But now you're asking about the objective reality, apart from the subjective viewer.
I guess I'm asking, are holograms objective reality only?
All we know is what we subjectively can think about. And in our subjective reality, there are these rules of interaction of energy that generates everything else in the universe. So that's still subjective, but we call it objective if it doesn't appear that it came from our mind.
So the future would be also subjective.
Yes, and the future also appears to be separate from us. It appears to not have happened. However, if you look at reality in a more broad way, all of the things that have happened and all of the things that are happening and will happen are all part of a super holographic interference pattern that exists simultaneously.
So in the holographic pattern, all possibilities exist.
Yes.
Where does human choice fit into this?
Well, human choice is an illusion, of course. And when you add up enough different waves, you create a pattern which appears to be something. So if you have enough different influences, those add up together to give you preferences, and those add up to give you perceptions of things that are different than other things. But it's an illusion, as is choice.
Well, and I'm thinking choice in the context of a choice is a commitment. So that a lot of my interest is on action and how you actually interact with a reality or a particular possibility. And how do I distinguish my commitments from within the holographic universe? What is a commitment?
Well, commitment certainly is something that's born of your brain. It's a construct.
Mm-hmm.
And when there is a commitment, then what follows is the result. If the result doesn't follow, there wasn't a commitment.
So Gene, I'd like to kind of connect the dots here a little bit and really dive into the practical application of a lot of your thinking and so forth. So given your insights and obvious genius, what are the practical implications of this, or what are you working on now that's got some what my clients would say, where's the beef? What's the application?
Well, there really are so many applications that come out of understanding how things interact in the universe on the level of interference of waves, which is the basis of holography. So as an example, working with the brain, it's been a big mystery what the brain is, how it works, how it does what it does. But with this understanding of it, it now becomes possible to write software that makes a computer be able to be like the brain, to be able to have emotions, to be able to have creativity, to have insights, to reason, to do the things that we do. And of course that brings up the issues of, is it a sentient being and does it have rights and so on, which is a whole other discussion. But it gives the ability to create that kind of a computer program so that, for instance, in practicality, a search engine can be made that instead of what you have now where you put in a string of words and then you wait and you get a million or a few million responses, it would then know what you're looking for, and it would then look at those millions of responses as if you were looking at it, and just because it's a computer, it can do it in a few seconds. So now out of millions, you'd get 1 or 2 or 5 of the things that you really wanted to know, and if you had the time, you could have looked through the millions and you would have picked those 5.
Is this what they're actually working on in artificial intelligence labs now?
No.
So this is a whole different take on
That's
artificial
right.
intelligence.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a different way. What they're doing is more of a simulation of what they think the brain does. And that's not the same as what the brain actually does holographically.
So you're saying if you know these holographic principles, you can. This is something you're working on now?
Yes.
And I know you're an extraordinarily modest man, but I know you have 60 patents or something like that.
Using holography to generate an image that is uncopyable because it's containing all of the information, unlike what a photograph does, allowed me to come up with the idea of a hologram to put on credit cards or debit cards, for instance. And that was an exciting, inspirational kind of an aha that I had. And I did the work on it in the lab, and proved that it could be done and proved that you can actually transfer a hologram onto a flat surface and inexpensively. And nobody knew that that was possible, but it occurred to me, and then I did the work, and it really worked. So that led to the use of holograms as an anti-counterfeiting device and credit cards and many other locations. So that's one of them. I did a lot of three-dimensional imaging with this new holographic principle and applied it to medical applications. One time I was working with a doctor at Bellevue Hospital in New York and had this new holographic system set up, and the patient that came in was there to just get an update on her pregnancy, and we did the scan. And normally with an x-ray scan, especially back then when we did it, you'd look at the scans and you'd see a flat image, and your mind would have to try to put together what it all means. With my holographic system, we were able to get a full three-dimensional image of the internal structure of her body.
Gene, so you're saying that actually your work is the foundation for 3D printing?
Well, not the current type of 3D printing, but the way 3D printing should be. And for instance, the way it is on Star Trek, Captain Picard goes to the replicator and says, Earl Grey tea hot, and it coalesces and there it is. Today's 3D printing is really using literally a print head to print, but instead of ink, it's using some type of a polymer or plastic and build it up, and it's called additive manufacturing, and layer by layer. And it's a very tedious process, and if you want to make something of any size or complexity, it takes quite a long time. But with a holographic reconstruction, all the energy interferes to create the pattern of where the matter is, only where the matter is, and so the material that you send that energy into instantly turns into rigid matter. The rest of it just goes away, so you can then reconstruct a complex, a big object instantaneously. And that's what we're working on developing right now in that regard. And that's matter replication, and that's feasible to do now.
Well, I think I can only say wow, and I really appreciate this. I mean, I would like to do this for a lot longer time, but for now, let's just say thank you, and I very much appreciate the conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Likewise. Future. It takes pure human grit and creativity to create the possible future.